In this lecture, we are talking about the larval forms in the case of echinoderms. As in the previous lectures, we have discussed about that the larval forms, they are developed in the whole life cycle of a particular animal, and they are representing the, you can say, the intermediate stages of the life history of that particular animal. Now, if we take the case of echinoderms, so here we'll be taking up the different types of larvae which are found in echinoderms. We'll be taking up the structures of these larvae, and we'll be taking up that how these larval forms, they have developed from one to another, and ultimately they are going for the formation of the adult one. So if I go further in this particular part, the echinoderms, they are the unisexual animals. So the sexual dimorphism is absent over here. Fertilization takes place in water, so that means the fertilization is external one. The development, it may be direct or indirect. So you should be very clear that if it is a direct development, then the form which is formed in between the eggs and the adults, they will be very comparable to the you can say a juvenile stage. So that will be very close to the adult ones. And if you have the indirect kind of development, then you are having different forms of larvae which are present in the life cycle of the animal. If the development is indirect, it includes the larval stages. So that's why it is called as indirect. So it is not directed towards the adult animal. So it is including many larval stages. That can be one, that can be two, three, or more. It depends upon the animal. So in different classes of echinoderms, we have different types of the larvae which are completing the development up to the adult formation. So we'll be seeing in this particular lecture that there are a number of larvae which are formed in different animals. The larval forms, and it is bilaterally symmetrical. Now this is a very important point in echinoderms, that all they have is the bilateral symmetry. So if you cut it laterally from any side, it will be divisible into two equal parts. So that is the bilateral symmetry. So it undergoes the metamorphosis, and radial symmetry adult is developed. So as you take up the case of the starfish, suppose, so it has got a radial symmetry. So these adults, they have got radial symmetry, but the larval forms, they have got bilateral symmetry in them. Now that was about the echinoderms, and now if I talk about the larval forms that are present in different classes of the echinoderms, if I take the Asteroidea class, this is the first class, and we have got Bipeneria and Brachiolaria Larva in this particular class. If I take Aphrodisia, we have got Echinoplutus. So this is the larval stage. In Echinoidea, we have got the Echinoplutus. So these are the two types of the Pluteus larva that is very, very important in the case of the echinoderms. Now, if I take the class Holoturidia or Holoturidia, so we have the larva Oracularia in this particular class. And if I take the Crinoidea, the last part, so we have got the Doliolaria and the Pentacrenard Larva in this particular case. Now, first of all, I am starting with the Diplodola Larva, as this is a very, very important stage in the case of echinoderms. So this larva, we have not seen it in the previous list. I'm just telling you that why it is not in the previous list. If you take the structure of this Diplodola, so here you can see that we have a mouth, we have got an esophagus, then we have a stomach, we have an intestine, and we have an anus. So students, this is a full alimentary canal. And this Diplodola larva, it is very, very important stage in the case of echinoderms because it is the first larval stage of all the echinoderms. So if I take this particular stage, that the echinoderms, they have to develop up to adults. Diplurula is a kind of stage which will be present in almost all the echinoderms. So this is the very first stage that is developed in the case of echinoderms. That's why it is very, very important. The second thing, it is also known as the early Bipeneria larva. So this is that was in the list which we have seen previously. So it is the early Bipeneria larva since it shows a very close resemblance with Diplurula. So that means this Diplurula larva, it will be forming the next stage which is called as the Bipeneria larva. So they are resembling each other and they are very close in structure. So that's why they are taken, sometimes they have been written as like this is early Bipeneria larva. So that is called as Diplurula. Now it is believed that all the modern echinoderms, they have been derived from a Diplurula-like ancestor. Now this is a very, very important line as per the evolution of the echinoderms is concerned. Now if you take up the whole life history of all the types of all the classes of the echinoderms, then you can well see that they are starting from this Diplurula larva-like ancestor. So it has been hypothesized that the ancestor of all the present echinoderms, it is believed that it will be just like this Diplurula. So on the tip, you can see some special sense organs. So this is for sensing. So that is a very, very important stage in the case of echinoderms, as all the echinoderms, they are starting by this kind of stage. Now if I take something more about this, the Diplodula form is reached during the development and is characterized by a bilaterally symmetrical egg-shaped body. So as we have seen in the previous diagram, it is quite egg-shaped in structure. And the ventral concave side bears the mouth and is encircled by a circumoral ciliated band. So here students, as we have seen in the previous slide, that the mouth, esophagus, stomach, and intestine and the anus, they are present, and they are present on the ventral concave side. Now if I take the second thing, the anus is disposed ventrally. That means the anus is also present on the ventral side. And you may have heard of a word which is called as torsion. So in that torsion actually is in the case of mollusks. But if I take over here, there is some kind of a, you can say, process in which the anus and the mouth, they are also rotated to some degree in these cases also. So here the ventral anus is also present. The digestive canal is differentiated into esophagus, stomach, and intestine that we have seen in the diagram. The preoral lobe, which is situated the anterior to the mouth, bears an apical sensory plate or tuft of the cilia that we have already seen, that it has got a sensory kind of cilia which are present in the anterior side of this particular larval form. Now the ciliation on the body of the surface, it becomes reduced to a ciliard band. Now students, in the larvae of the echinoderms, you will be seeing in the coming stages also that they have got ciliated bands over the body. Some bands are for swimming, some are for are for sensing the environment. So here also we have got a ciliard band. The Diplodula form is regarded by many as the hypothetical ancestral form of the echinoderms, as we have seen in the previous slide also. That was the first line, that all the echinoderms, they developed from a Diplodula-like larva. So it is regarded as the hypothetical ancestral form. Now the major changes involved in other echinoderm larvae are due to the differential disposition of the ciliated bands. Just a few minutes ago, I have talked about the ciliated bands, that the larval forms, they have got many ciliated bands in different forms. So here also, there is a major change involved in these ciliated bands as per the position of the ciliated bands is concerned. So we'll be taking up these bands later on. Now students, we are going for the Bipeneria larva. So after Diplodola, we have got a Bipeneria. So Bipeneria larva, it is very, you can say, close to the Diplodola form, and it is also considered as to be the early Diplodola, or you can say the vice versa. Now, it is a larval form which is seen in the life history of the starfish. So as we have gone through the strias in our BScs, so there also we have studied the Bipeneria larva. Now here, the fertilized egg is homolacethal, and it undergoes the holoblastic cleavage and develops into blastula and then gastrula stages. So this is the case of the starfish. So here we have the homolacethal types of eggs, and they are undergoing the cleavages, going for the blastula and the gastrula stages. And after that, the gastrula, it elongates in length and it gives rise to the Pipineria larva. Now this larva is formed, and it is a bilaterally symmetrical, free-swimming pelagic larva. So it is free swimming, it has got ciliated bands, it can swim to some extent in the water, so that's why it is a free swimming stage. The pre-oral region is elongated in this particular larval form, and the post-oral region is quite broad as compared to the pre-oral region. So the anterior end, it forms the pre-oral lobe. So this is the structure of the whole overall structure of the Bipeneria larva. Now if I talk about this larva, the ciliated band at the pre-oral lobe in the anterior side, it forms two separate bands. So this is the actual difference between the Diplodola and the Bipeneria larva. So the pre-oral band of cilia and the post-oral band of cilia, they are the two separate bands over here. So we have a pre-oral band and a post-oral band which are formed in this particular case. Now these two bands of cilia, they are drawn into many arms, and this is a most important point in Bipeneria. So they are nothing to do with the arms of the starfish, but this is a very important aspect that should be taken very, you can say, structurally important. So these bands, they are drawn into arms. So here you can very well see that there are several arms which are present in the Bipeneria larva. And if I go by these arms, these are the ventromedian arm, then we have the pair of the preoral arm, the median dorsal arm, a pair of anterior dorsal arm, a pair of posterior dorsal arm, a pair of posterior lateral arm, a pair of post-oral arm. So students, these are the arms, and the digestive system is developed completely with the mouth and the anus. So here, this is the mouth and the very center, and if you take up on the posterior end, here we have the anus. So this larva, it resembles the Tornaria larva of the Blanoglossus. If you go by the structure, so it is very close to the Tornaria larva of the Blanoglossus. So in BSc also, in the first SEM, we have taken up the Blanoglossus, and we have gone through the Tornaria larva also. So Bipeneria is very close to the Tornaria of the Blanoglossus. That's why some of the scientists, they take the study of the larvae very important. So what is the significance of the study of the larval forms? This is the significance. So if you take two larvae and they are very, very similar and they are of different animals, that means there is some correlation, there is some degree of association in between those two adult animals. If they have a common uh, morphologically similar kind of larvae. So that means there is some kind of association between the echinoderms and the blanoglossus. The larva, it slowly grows into the next larval form, which is called as the Brachiolaria larva. So students, the Bipeneria, it is resembling the Diplodola. And now the Bipeneria, it will be developing into the next stage, which will be called as the Brachiolaria larva. Now, if I take this particular larva into account, I've got a median dorsal lobe. This is the dorsal side lobe. This is the median ventral lobe. This is on the ventral side. This is the preoral arm. As we take the mouth over here, so this is the preoral arm, which is present above the level, or the you can say before the mouth. So this is the preoral arms. And if you zoom into it, this particular structure is giving you the preoral arms or the brachiolaria arms. So in the center, you have the adhesive disc. So this is for the attachment of this particular larva. And you have the mouth in the very center. Then you have these are the ciliated bands which are present in this particular larval form. You have the post-oral arms which are at the level after the mouth. So that's why they are post-oral. Post refers to before. Pre refers to before, and the post-oral refers to after. So here we have the esophagus, we have got a stomach in the very center over here, then we have the posterior lateral arms. So these are the posterior lateral arms. Then we have the rudiment part which is present over here. So in some of the stages that will be lost after successive stages over here. So that is the structure of the Brachiolaria larva. So this larva is being developed from the Bipeneria. So if I take this larva into account, so Bipeneria larva, from which the Brachiolaria has developed, it swims for few weeks in the seawater with the help of the ciliated bands. So it transforms into the next stage, which is called as the Brachiolaria larva. Now it is bilaterally symmetrical larva, as we have taken in the previous cases also. It is pelagic larva. It shows 3 brachiular arms with suckers, and they are 1 median and 2 lateral in position. So we have seen these arms in the structure of the Brachiolaria. So at the tip of the brachiular arms, adhesive structure, they will make their appearance, and they are for the attachment. So in the previous section, in the previous diagram, we have seen the adhesive disc also. Now this larva, it shows all the arms that are seen in a Bipeneria. So it is very closely resembling the Bipeneria. But these arms, they are very long and hanging. So here, what is the difference from Bipeneria? The Brachiolaria larva has got long arms as compared to the Bipeneria. Now these ciliated arms, they will be helpful for the swimming of this larva in the water. So Brachiolaria will also swim in water. So the digestive system is completely developed with the defined stomach and the intestine, as we have seen in the Diplodola, we have seen in the Brachiolaria, also we have seen in the Bipeneria also. Now this larva, after swimming for few days, it settles down. So when it settles, it gets attached to it by its adhesive arms. So these arms and the adhesive disc, they are helping in the attachment of the Brachiolaria to some solid object. Now the posterior end of the larva, it enlarges and lifts to the right side. Now this is a very important point. Now from this rudiment, which we have seen in the previous picture, we have a rudiment on the posterior side. So from this, rudiments of 5 arms will arise. So that will be a point from which 5 arms will arise. Thus, slowly, the larva metamorphoses into the adult. Now, these are the 5 arms of the starfish. Now, these are the rudiments of the 5 arms of the starfish, which are developed from the Brachiolaria larva. So, ultimately, they will be changing, they will be metamorphosizing into an adult. Now, students, we have another form which is called as the Pentactula Larva. Now, this larval stage is regarded as the next evolutionary step of the Diplodola Larva. Now see, one line we have seen that we have a Diplodola, we have got a Bipeneria, we have a Brachiolaria Larva. So that was one line. So here also, the Diplodola stage, it is also developing into a Pentactula Larva in some of the forms. Now this larva has 5 tentacles around the mouth. That is why we call it as the Pentactula Larva. Now just taking on, the hydrocele is separated from the rest of the coelom to form the future water vascular system. Now in this part, the hydrocele is modified further with time into the water vascular system. Now, if you see this particular diagram, these are the 5 tentacles which are present around the mouth. That's why it is having this particular name, Penta. So, this is the particular structure of this Pentactula larva. So, if you see, we have got a particular, this is the esophagus. We have got a anus, well-defined anus. We have got an intestine. We have got a stomach. We have got an anus. Then we have got a dorsal mesentery, which is present on the dorsal side. This is the hydropore, which will be a part of the water vascular system after some time. This is the exocele. We have a stone canal over here, which is a very, very important canal in the case of echinoderms also. So this is the water ring, which will be forming the water vascular system afterwards. And these are the primary tentacles, which are 5 in number. And that's why this larva has got this name. Now students, we have another larva in the case of echinoderms, which is called as the Oracularia Larva. Now this is the primary structure of the Oracularia. So here we have the pre-oral loop or the band. So this is the mouth, you have the esophagus, then we have the stomach, then we have the anus. So the digestive system is completely developed in this particular case. Then if I take some of the more things, you have the somatocele. This is the right somatocele and this is the left somatocele. And we have the typical structure of the echinoderm larva in the Oracularia also. So if I go for the larval form, this is present in the class Holoturidia, and this larva is present in this particular class. It is a free-swimming pelagic larva, as we have seen in the previous cases also. Now here the arms are absent. The alimentary canal is well developed. It opens with mouth and ends with the anus, and intestine is curved at this particular larval stage. Now, in Japan and Bermuda, very big Oracularia larvae, they are developed. So they can be 15 mm in length. They are quite big in size as compared to the other forms. So usually this larva is 1 mm in length. So this is the usual length of this larva. But in Japan, it can be like 15 mm in size. Now, this larval form is quite big in size as compared to the previous forms. The ciliated bands, they are well developed. The ciliated band continues through the oral loop and the anal loop. So these ciliated bands, they are also helping the Oracularia, as it is a free swimming pelagic form. So these are helping in the swimming motion of the larval forms. Now students, this is another larva which is very, very important in the case of echinoderms, and this is called as the Pluteus larva. Now if I take Pluteus into account, if you see the structure of Pluteus, we have got a definite mouth, we have got an esophagus, then we have got stomach in the center, you have got the intestine over here, and these are the pluted rods which are present in this larva. That's why they got the name the Pluteus. And this is the somatocele, the right one and the left one, and this is the hydrocele. So we have got a hydrocele for the water vascular system, we have got a somatocele for the formation of the organs in the particular animal, adult animal. Now, this larval form can be regarded as a modification of the Oracularia larva, which we have seen previously. Now, Oracularia of the Holoturidia class, it can develop into Pluteus in some of the animals. Now, like the Oracularia, it has a single ciliated band which is present over here. So this is the ciliated band. But it possesses long arms with the ciliated bands at the margins. So this ciliated band is actually present just like this around the mouth. And these are also modified into arms in this particular case. Now it has comparatively smaller pre-oral lobe. Now here you can see the pre-oral lobe is smaller. The post-anal part of the body is quite well developed. So here at the back end of the larva, it is quite well developed. It has got all the structures. The arms, they are also supported by the calcareous rods, which are called as the pluted rods in this particular case. The Pluteus larvae, they are of two kinds. They are of two types. If I take the types, the first type is the Echinoplutius. The second type is the Echinoplutus. So as we have seen in the previous first table, we have these two types of larvae, Echinoplutius and Echinoplutus. And these are present in different classes of echinoderms. Now both the larval forms, they possess the post-oral arms, the anterolateral arms, posterior-lateral arms, and posterior-dorsal arms. So there are four types of the arms which are present in both the Echinoplutius and the Echinoplutus type of larvae. The typical Echinoplutius may be absent in certain forms of the echinoderms. That means they can be without the formation of the Echinoplutius stage. So as we have seen that the Pluteus stage is formed from the Oracularia larva. So Oracularia may give rise to the typical Echinoplutus larva, but it is not going for Echinoplutius in some cases. Now the larva, it may be elongated and without ciliated bands. It may be. So if you take the case of Echinoplutus, so it may be elongated. So the skeletal rods are usually absent if present only one in number. So if you take these two forms, there can be the skeletal rods present, and if they are present, they are only one in number in these two forms. The presence of the Pluteus larva in both the cases is an example of the parallel evolution. So in both the classes, you have the Pluteus larva, either it is Ophio or it is Echino. So that is a kind of parallel evolution with time. Now, first of all, I am taking the Echinoplutius larva into account. Now, this larva is seen in the case of the brittle star or the class Oracularia. So here you can very well see the formation of different types of arms which we have seen in the previous case. So we got anterior lateral arms, we have got a posterior lateral arm, we have got the post-oral arm, then we have the posterior dorsal arms, and we have got a definite mouth in the center, we have got the esophagus, we have got stomach, we have got the particular anus also. So we have got the somatocele, we have got the hydrocele, as we have seen in the previous cases also. So the arms, they are directed upwards. So they are directed towards the upside. So that is a typical form of the Pluteus larva and the echino also. The pre-oral loop is reduced. So if you take the loop or the ciliated loop, it is reduced in size. The ciliated band is undivided. That means there is a complete ciliated band which is present over here. The posterior lateral arms, they are very long and directed forward. So the posterior lateral arms, they are emerging from this site and they are going up till the, you can say, the top end. So they are quite long and they are directed forward. So this is the type of the structure of the Pluteus in the case of the Freudia class, in the case of brittle star. Now if I take up the second part, which is the Echinoplutus, we are having a very similar structure as we have seen in the Pluteus kind of larvae. So that's why the structural similarity between these two types of larval forms, they have taken by the scientists as a, you can say, confirmatory kind of a modification for the parallel evolution of the echinoderms, as we have seen in the previous cases. So if I go for the structure of this particular Echinoplutus larva, so here also we have got a definite mouth in the very center, we have got a esophagus, we have got a stomach, then we have got an intestine and the anus in the very center. We have got the pre-oral arms, we have got the anterolateral, the post-oral arms, and then we have the posterior dorsal arms over here. And these arms, they are stiff, they are quite stiff, and they are like anchored by some kinds of calcareous rods. And these calcareous rods, they are made up of calcium carbonate. So when this larval form, it is swimming, so these arms, they should be kept like stiff, and that is with the help of the calcareous rods which are present in these arms. If I go for the posterior end, we have got the posterior lateral processes, and this is for the some kind of attachment of this particular larva to the substratum. So if I go further, first of all, it is seen in the life history of the class Echinoidea. So where we have the Echinoplutus larva. Now it is a microscopic larva, it is very small in size, it swims in water, as we have the ciliated bands also. Now this larva shows the ciliated bands which are developed into arms. So the fully developed Echinoplutus larva, it should have 6 pairs of the arms, but they may have like 4 or 5 pairs of arms in some cases. Usually 6 pairs of the arms, they should be developed in this particular form. Now the arms, they are supported by the calcareous rods, as we have earlier discussed in the structure of this particular larva, and they are formed of, the rods are formed of the calcium carbonate in this particular case. Now the digestive system, if we take, it is having the mouth, it is having the esophagus, the stomach, and then we have the intestine, and at the end we have got the anus. So it is a complete kind of digestive system which is present over here. It develops the hydrocele and the vestibule, which will be the anterior parts of the this larva. Now these parts, they grow on the oral side of the animal. So these are developing on the oral side, as the vestibule will be on the oral side. So from the hydrocele, which is developed inside this particular larva, the 5 radial canals will develop with the time, whenever it is going for the adult formation. So this larva, it undergoes a rapid metamorphosis and develops into an adult. So ultimately, the Echinoplutus will be forming the adult form in the case of the echinoidians. Now students, here is the next, I can say the last larval form over here in this particular lecture, which is called as the Doliolaria Larva. Now this is a mature larva which is seen in this particular diagram. So here you can have a number of ciliated bands which are present on this particular larval form. So here these are designated as ciliated bands. On the top you have the apical cilia. So this is the apical sensory plate which is sensing the environment. This is the hydrocele. Then here in the center you have the mouth, you have the esophagus. This is the pharynx and esophagus. We have the stomach. Then we have the intestine in the very center, and at the base we have the anus. So this is the left somatocele, this is the right somatocele over here. So the blastopore is closed over here, and these are some of the ossicles which are present in this particular larva form. It is a kind of a skeletal system of this larva. So this is the overall structure of the Doliolaria. Now in Crinoidea group of the animals, this is the class Crinoidea, we have this particular Doliolaria larva present. Now it is a free swimming larval form, as all of them were. So it contains an apical tuft of the cilia which will be sensory in nature and which will be sensing the environment. On the mid-ventral line near the apical plate, an adhesive plate is present. So in the very center you have the adhesive plate which is present near the apical plate. Now the body, it shows 4 to 5 ciliated bands. As you can see over here, you have the ciliated band number 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So it can be 4 or 5 in different cases. So in between the third and the second ciliated band, a vestibule is present. So here we have the vestibule in between the second and the third, you can say larval, the ciliated band. So this is the vestibule. Now after swimming for some time, it will develop a stalk. Now this is a very important point. It is forming a stalk. It is called as the Pentacrenard Larva then. So it will attach to the substratum. The internal organs will rotate at 90 degrees. It develops into an adult. Now, as we have seen previously, the Pentacrenard larva, so Doliolaria, it will develop into the Pentacrenard type, and that will develop into the adult form. So students, that was all about the larval forms which are present in the Echinoderms. And if I go with the all larval forms as a whole, so they are first of all starting from a Diplodola-like ancestor. They can be going for Bipeneria, they can be going for other larval forms from the Diplodola-like ancestor, and those will be containing ciliated bands, those will be containing arms, the calcareous rods, then you will be having a complete digestive system, bilateral symmetry, then you will be seeing that these are our forms, they can change into other forms also. So in different classes you have different types of the larval forms, and they are going for the metamorphosis and they are making the adult forms at the last. So if you go for the significance of the importance of the study of the larval forms, it is that if you study the whole life forms or the larval forms of the Echinoderms, then you can have some perception of the interactions or the associations of the different forms in the Echinoderms. So that was all about the larval forms in Echinoderms. Thank you very much.